what? Alright, so we don't know what the queue's like in Asda. I don't know what colour. I can't read that. Oh yeah, there we go, vegan. That's good, that chocolate, that custard. Tangy worms. Yeah, it's got eggs in it. I need to find out where the cheese is. Oh, free from cornflakes. Yes. Right, I need to find cheese. Where's it going to be? Do you want some bread? Do you want some tiger bread? Oh yeah. Kyle.
Yeah, no.
Here we are. Well, I'll grab some applewood. That's good.
How ironic, the meat.
Irony, yeah. Look, vegan death aisle.
Non-dairy.
Oh, go on then.
Yeah,
120. Right, we'll grab some slices. They're proper good. Want some soya milk? Ah, strawberry soya. Hey, I'm living the high life here. Right, I want them in the basket. Excellent.
We done.
Yeah. Look at that. Look at this. Look at this. Dead bodies. Dead bodies. Dead bodies. People feeding the kids dead bodies. Is it open? Oh yeah. Why?
Cheese. Can't have Subway.
Someone at the bus station arguing about chicken legs. Yeah. Well, they're running 2 buses an hour. They're only allowing 11 people. 11. That and that on the bus at once. So we're going to have waited like an hour nearly for a bus. Arguments about chicken legs becomes entertaining. She's still at it. Chill out. Back home again. The dude at the Subway was a bit skimpy on the old salad butty. Look at that. Gotta do some editing till he's waiting for crumbs. Aren't you? Tilly. Tilly.
Tomorrow.
Hey guys, it's the next morning, and I just want to quickly address this comment that was left on my last video, because the first portion of this video features my non-vegan son. So Michelle, how do you feel about Richard thinking your son is a piece of shit too? How well does that sit with you? It's an interesting comment because it's okay with me, right? If my son is behaving like a piece of shit, then if someone tells him he's behaving like a piece of shit, then that's fine by me. But interestingly, I showed my son this comment and I said, how do you feel if I called you a piece of shit for eating meat? And he said, I don't care. Interesting. I think actually he does care, but there's some denial there. There is. You might deny that, but there is. But moving swiftly on, and I want to thank Chris Brancier once again for directing me to a really interesting article. This article is 10 years old. How have I never seen this before? How have I missed this? Anyway, this was published in 2010 in PLOS One. The brain function networks associated to human and animal suffering differ amongst omnivores, vegetarians and vegans. It's relating to empathy and affective reactions, so emotional reactions for suffering occurring in your own species, i.e. humans, and non-human animals. What these guys did was use functional MRI, the use of the MRI machine that is able to actually look at the brain functioning, different parts of the brain functioning when it's active, when you're doing an active activity. This was a small study, right? Because fMRI studies do tend to be small because technology is hugely expensive at the moment. But there were 60 people in total, 20 omnivores, 19 vegetarians and 21 vegans, matched for age and sex, and brain activation was investigated using fMRI during an observation of negative affective pictures, so pictures that will elicit negative emotional reactions in the average human. So these were negative pictures of human suffering and animal suffering. So quite graphic, I would imagine, although I don't see any examples in the supplementary materials of what, the pictures look like. So I would have liked to have seen an example of the type of pictures, but showing mutilations, murdered people, and human and animal threat, torture, wounds, etc. And then the control images were just natural landscapes, which would be eliciting either a neutral or probably a mildly positive response. All right, so before we dig into the results, let's look at the introduction section, because this will give us some background information. So social cognition, so how we think in the social world, includes mental processes necessary to understand and store information about the self and others, as well as interpersonal norms and procedures to navigate efficiently in the social world. One hallmark of social cognition in humans is the ability to understand conspecifics as beings like oneself, with intentional and mental lives like one's own. Accordingly, human beings tend to identify conspecifics and attribute mental states to them, so they're putting themselves in someone else's shoes. Such abilities rely on the activity of several brain regions, including the frontal lobes, right? So there's various portions of the frontal lobe here. So the frontal cortex, the medial prefrontal cortex, and the cingulate cortex. The temporal lobes, including the amygdala. The amygdala is well developed in many species of animals and controls or partially controls emotional responses. The fusiform gyrus and the somatosensory cortices. The majority of these regions are also critically involved in processing of emotions. This suggests that the merging between emotions and feelings expressed by oneself and those perceived of other individuals may be a key ingredient of social understanding and may play a major role in promoting empathy, pro-social behaviour, so that's like helping behaviours, and moral norms. Moreover, empathic responses can be modulated by the subjective attitudes held towards suffering individuals. If you have, let's say, a particular dislike for a certain group of people, then you might moderate your emotional response. Other brain parts become active and they lessen the emotional response you might have. Or they might increase it. They might increase it because you might have a certain amount of hatred for that person. So you increase your emotional response to a picture of the suffering of that type of person. That's perfectly possible. Empathy towards other persons can be defined as the ability to share the other person's feelings in an embodied manner and has been related to recruitment of a network including the somatosensory, insular cortices, limbic systems and the anterior cingulate cortex. So there's lots of brain regions going on when we're processing emotions. That's why humans have very complex emotional responses. They're not just acting on the emotion, they're also interpreting the emotion, right? They're moderating their emotional response. So they're able to navigate through the social world, right? Without either becoming complete emotional wrecks or just killing people they don't like. In this study, we postulated that the neural representation of conditions of abuse and suffering might be different amongst subjects who make different feeding choices due to ethical reasons, and thus result in the engagement of different components of the brain networks associated with empathy and social cognition. We tested this hypothesis that the neural processing underlying empathy in vegetarians and vegans might not only operate for representations about humans, but also for animals, and thus vary between them and omnivorous subjects. Vegetarians and vegans who decided to avoid the use of animal products for ethical reasons have a moral philosophy of life based on a set of basic values and attitudes towards life, nature, and society that extends well beyond food choice. Veganism was coined from vegetarianism and acknowledges the intrinsic of all sentient life and rejects any hierarchy of acceptable suffering amongst creatures. Veganism is a lifestyle that seeks to exclude the use of animals for food, clothing, or any other purpose. Okay, so the results are quite complicated, but I'll leave a link to this paper. It's an open access journal, so everybody will have access to this article in full, and we'll go down to the discussion where the authors interpret the findings. Alright, so the first main finding of the study was a common functional architecture of emotional processing in vegetarians and vegans. So their brain regions were very similar when looking at pictures related to suffering. So while omnivores were characterised by a greater activation of the bilateral posterior mid-part of the cortex, both human and animal negative valence scenes, vegetarians and vegans have consistently and higher engagement of empathy-related areas while observing negative scenes, independently of the species of the individuals involved, which is characterised by an increased recruitment of these particular parts of the brain that are related to empathic reactions. Increased activations of these regions in vegetarians and vegans during human and animal suffering is likely to reflect a stronger empathic response in those groups. Remarkably, vegetarians and vegans have a higher engagement of empathy-related areas while observing negative scenes regarding animals rather than humans, with an additional recruitment of some other parts of the brain when they're viewing animal scenes. It's so interesting that vegetarians and vegans, it's almost like this inflamed empathic response to the suffering of others, which omnivores are less likely to have. There's another interesting finding here. The pattern of increased recruitment of empathy-related areas in vegetarians and vegans during animal suffering were associated with a reduced activation of the right amygdala in comparison to omnivores. The amygdala responds to various kinds of aversive stimuli, both strongly fearful and threatening scenes, and to a lesser extent to those associated with disgust. Remarkably, the within-group analysis during animal pictures showed an abscess of signal changes in terms of activations and deactivations within the amygdala in vegetarians and vegans, suggesting a down-regulation of amygdala response from areas located in the frontal lobes in an attempt to regulate emotion through cortical processing in these subjects. So what they're trying to do is control their own emotions, because the emotional response is so strong to animal suffering that they have to try and control that, or else they go crazy. When we talk about just how we feel about animal suffering, when I'm walking through a supermarket like I did yesterday afternoon, and I pass the meat aisles, I don't see food, guys. I see dead bodies. I have the same emotional response in my head as I would if I went into a funeral home and asked to view one of their dead bodies that is laid out for the family to go and visit. I see dead bodies, guys. So I've got to be able to control that emotional response. And omnivores are just there, just shopping, just walking along with their children. We have this reaction as vegans. There were some differences, small differences between the vegetarians and the vegans, if you go down this study a little bit further. I want to see whether this has been replicated. I'm sure there has been extensions to this study because this is now 10 years old. Our results converge with theories that consider empathy as accommodating a shared representation of emotions and sensations between individuals, allowing us to understand others. This was also led to speculate that the neuronal basis of empathy involves several distinct components, including mirroring mechanisms. Now, we do know that mirror neurons exist. In the last 10 years, we've learned a lot about mirror neurons. We know more about the actual basis of what is going on in the brain now. Well, it gives me an explanation as to why when I walk through a supermarket, I see dead bodies. I'm walking through a morgue. Other people just do not get it. And that is really, really sad. Anyway, guys, hope you found this video interesting. If you want to support the channel, check out my Patreon, check out my merch, take your tea with Tilly, Bella, Poppy or Jack. And I will speak to you very soon. Bye, guys.